We live in a world where there's ever increasing the amount of options and opportunities that everybody has. And I think this is what really hurts the happiness around the whole society, and why depression and everything that we feel is becoming worse when we actually have more innovation, we have more opportunities, we have bigger things to work towards, except everybody just seems to be in a worse state of mind. And I think this is very important to talk about, because it's more about your options, commitments, and quite frankly, the focus and redirecting that focus. So I want to talk about those 3 points, because I think naturally, as a business person, you need to understand what commitments you make and what opportunities you have to really shed the light on, actually making the focus, making the commitment, making sure that you can just focus on that one thing, and there will be other opportunities out there in the world. But whenever you're maybe you're a starting entrepreneur, you're trying to figure out what business you want to start, what business you want to venture in. And it can come down to like the smaller decisions where you just have to commit, because if you want to be great at anything, you have to be committed, right? In all aspects of life, you have to be committed. You have to be committed to the business relationship you have. You have to be committed to the, personal, intimate partner you have. You have to be committed to anything you want to be great at. And what the most important thing to understand is that I've been realizing and looking into more is that we all have options. And 30 years ago, we didn't have all the opportunities we have today. And what happens in the society of life is we look back and say, man, things were so much greater then. But the only reason we think it might have been greater is because we didn't have so many decisions to make. Now in life, I think every day we have more and more decisions to make than we did the day previously, and especially years previous. Because we have more opportunities, we have more options, we have a better understanding about things. We have to look at it in a deeper way. We went through pains, we went through challenges that we don't want to go through again. So we have to look at them in a different perspective now. And whenever we have to weigh these options and weigh these decisions using multiple different factors, it ends up draining us, and it puts a lot of weight, puts a lot of stress on us, because we know that we now have to understand that whatever decision we make can, in turn create a totally different outcome. But we have all these hundreds of thousands of different other options, different ways we can go about this. But you have to make one decision. And a lot of times when we have so many options, it clouds our judgment of whether or not we should make that one decision. We might delay that decision. We might be delaying making that jump, starting that business, because we don't really know if it's the best one for us. And sometimes you do just have to make that jump, right? It's not about trying to figure out every little option, because if you sat in life trying to figure out every little option that's allowed to you, you would spend a lifetime trying to figure it out, because there's so many options now, and in 50 years there's going to be an exponential amount of options, because it's growing every day. When we had a society, thinking back of like the simple days, when you hear your grandparents talk about it was much simpler back then, I wish we were living in that time. This a lot of times comes from being that we innovated a lot, we created a lot more opportunities nowadays. There's a lot more decisions we have to make. Back then, you didn't have to make so many decisions. It was just one way of living. There was no other thought otherwise. So because there was no thought otherwise, there was no other option, you just made the best of what you had, the good and the bad. It wasn't about always chasing the highs, always chasing the good. You just lived with what you had. And with what you had came, its own hurdles. It came with its own bad. It came with its own challenges that helped shape, who you are today. But it also brought a little bit of excitement into life, because if we just had good, and we always expected good, we would never have the joys of going through the challenge. And this is where our expectations then rise, because we have so many options, because we see that there is a lot more that we could create. Our expectations just become so much greater. Whereas, back then, the expectation was super low. It was like, this is just the simple way of living. It's this. There's not much more. And so because they accepted it, and because that was the way of life, you were more fulfilled, you were more satisfied with what you had. There wasn't this stress and weight on your shoulders of expectations piling up over and over, of these decisions piling up because of all of the alternatives that you might have, because of everything that that comes within your life. Like, we have so many more decisions that we don't even think about, but internally in our minds we might think about, right? You think about technology, we have our phones. We now have notifications coming in all the time. We have people that we can socialize and interact with over the phone, over our computer. And back then, they didn't have that. They didn't have these opportunities, so they didn't have to worry about them. But now that we have these opportunities, it creates more worry within ourselves. Because now we have to keep up more. Because now we have to make a decision whether, okay, am I going to go on my phone? Am I going to text somebody? Am I going to make this post? Am I going to do this? Or am I going to make food? Am I going to just put my phone down? We have more decisions to make. And because they didn't have the level of technology that we do, they didn't have these things within their life. They didn't have to make a decision on them because it wasn't there. And that's where the simpler things in life that your grandparents or whoever might talk to you that's older and say, you don't even understand it, kid. It was so much better back then. Because there wasn't the stresses of today. There wasn't so much change of today. There weren't so many options. And I wanted to spend a lot of time on that because I think it really shines a light. It grows the fact that there's always going to be more options. And we put a lot of stress on ourselves about it because we don't make the jump and we don't make the commitment because we always think there's something better. Because our expectation is now higher with what we are living in, that there's better things out there, that we don't accept what we're living. We don't accept the moment we're in. It's very hard a lot of times today for people to accept the moments that we're in because there's so many decisions, so many ways we can just grow. There's so many, we can move much faster in different opportunities. And because we can move much faster, it pressures us to need to keep up instead of just living in the moment. And I struggle with this a lot. Like, living in the moment is not an easy thing to do. And I think that's what rises the depression in other, younger human beings, and why that rate is just, rising, besides all the other factors, right? Because you got the normal, like, social media. It's like now people have to make the decision, okay, do we do this or do that? Or, I'm on social media and then people are saying this about this thing. I should probably be doing that too. And it clouds everything we do, and we just have to take a breath and just understand, okay, well, we have this life. But then it also rises the question of, okay, I'm trying to make commitments, but I know there's options. And what I've always said, the definition of like a commitment is knowing that there's no other alternatives. And I would like to frame it in a different way with, how I've been thinking about this now is it's not that you don't have any other options, that there's no other alternatives. The alternatives are there. You're never going to destroy all alternatives and all options because you had them before you made the commitment or before you made that decision to go into one area. Technically, they're still there. But you're making the commitment to yourself, saying that besides the fact that they're still there, internally, and what I'm going to focus on is not that. I'm going to make the decision knowing that what I'm focusing on, what am I committing myself to, is not those things. So it's separating the fact that you picked out this one decision, you picked out this one commitment out of, the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, right? And you're pushing all those away, saying those are not mine. I'm not even going to focus on them. I'm not even going to factor them into my equation because, quite honestly, they aren't commitments that I'd be making. They wouldn't ever be a commitment for me. Because this one that I decided is going to grow and expand and has more important pros than cons, because everything has pros and cons. Everything. And not every little decision, every option is going to share the same pros. Each one is going to have a pro that the others don't have. And so you have to find the one that aligns with you the most. The pro that goes above everything else. The one that you can commit yourself to knowing, hey, there are no other alternatives for me because they don't match this pro. There's alternatives and there's options, there's differences, but those aren't going to work for me. And that's why I'm going to stay committed and focused on this one thing. And I think when we look at it this way, it doesn't cut out the fact that you can always have in the back of your mind, hey, what about this other thing? What about, this shiny object? What about this business opportunity? What about this girl? What about this guy, right? What about, what if I didn't make this decision? What if I stayed where I was? What if I moved here? And it's all these what ifs that we are always going to have in the back of our mind. So that's why I wanted to change the frame, because it's not that you're never going to have those what ifs. It's not that you're going to never have the idea of the other options in your mind. It's that you're making the decision that you can have those ideas of the options. You can have all these other alternatives, but you're not going to focus on them. That you're not committing yourself to those. That even though they have their benefits and their cons, right? You get all the negativity from it as well, right? If you went with the other options, they have amazing benefits that maybe your option doesn't have, because each one might have that singular benefit that you will never have with the one you made. And that's what makes it so shiny, is because the decision and the commitment you made, it lacks in an area that brings out the shiny object in another option that you could have had, that you could make, because it lacks here. And that's where we start making ourselves jump from one thing to another. And we become a problem in ourselves because we don't commit. Because we always know that there's going to be one option that has a pro and a con, and we're going to think about that con, we're going to hit a rough spot, we're going to have that challenge, we're going to be in the bad instead of the good, and then there's another option over here that has all the good, that this one has the bad. That if we were when we're hitting the position of bad here, that we knew if we chose this option, it would be the complete reverse of it. You would be in the good, in the same exact situation. So that's when we feel like, man, well, if I just chose that option, and in the current situation I'm in, it would be so much better. Which you're never wrong saying. It's always the grass is greener on the other side. I think it could be. It's true. Yes, the grass might be greener. That's not the point. It's about going through the dead grass you have on your lawn, watering it, taking care of it, and fixing it. Because you could jump to the greener grass, and then you'll find all the BS and the bad stuff that comes with it. And you'll also hit that rough point. And you could probably watch many videos about this, about the cycle of when you hit certain feelings of business and when you want to jump to that next shiny object. And this can go throughout your relationships too. And whatever decision you make, you hit this point, you hit this wall, you hit this curve, right? But you have to understand that every single option has this. Even though you don't see it, because you see that it has the pro that aligns with what you would want with your current bad, with your current con. That's all you tend to think about because it's better. And we're in a world where we just have so many things that could be better. We have so many options when we look at, if you go to the store, there's just so many different alternatives. Like this one has, one little tweak of an ingredient that's different than this one. Right? Oh, but this one is a little bit more expensive than this one. And each of them can be fine. All of them can work. All of them can work for you. You just have to make this commitment. You have to make the decision that you're going to make that one work for you. And to make the best decision is by looking at, what you have available and not trying to keep always searching, because I think you can always be searching forever. At some point, you have to get 80%, 90% there and find that one that has that pro that aligns with you the most. And then work with the shit it has. Because it always has shit. And that's what you have to be tolerating about. It's like, it has pros and has cons, and I tolerate both of them because the pros outweigh everything else, outweigh the other options I see right now, and it aligns with me for a long-term commitment, a long-term vision of what I need. And that's when you make that commitment, you have to jump in with both feet, knowing that you have the other options, that they're going to be cool, that they're going to be shiny at some point once you hit a roadblock, once you hit a challenge, and that's okay. Because you're just going to stay with that option. And then now let's speak on when you get distracted, when you're off course, you make that commitment, you're on it. You're going to get distracted at some point. Your focus is based on the fact that you're not going to be focused on one thing all the time. I think people think that if they can't maintain focus on something, that they're not a focused person, that they'll never be good at, they'll never be hitting that focus that everybody talks about. People always say you need to be focused, but what does that really mean? It means that you can set aside everything else, right? Push everything else away, focus on that one thing, and a distraction, a woman in the red dress, will show up. It's guaranteed something else will show up, come into your head, come into your thoughts, distract your eyes, distract your brain, distract whatever you're doing. And the problem isn't that you got distracted. The problem is when you don't redirect that distraction and redirect yourself back to the focus. That is the muscle you need to work in your brain. That's the muscle you need to work for yourself. It's never the muscle of, I need to figure out how to make it so there's never a distraction. You can only control so much. Yes, if you can control the controllables. If you know certain things will make you distracted and will make it harder for you, so that way you have to grow that, work that muscle and then redirect your focus, make it so that in any environment you're unstoppable by building that muscle, but then also create the environment of where you can focus. Whether that means no windows, nothing, like where you can focus, or maybe it is in an area where it's just peaceful, you have a view, whatever that works for you. Whether it's working with people, with nobody, what's going to make it so you're the least distracted on what you need to do, but then know there's always going to be a distraction. After you control all the controllables, there's going to be a distraction that comes in, and you have to work that muscle over and over again. You might get distracted 5-10 minutes, but then redirect that focus. And if it's something that you keep getting distracted on, figure out how it is that you can block that even sooner. Because it's always about how quickly you can go back. It's never about having the distraction in the first place. It's about how quickly you can go back and understand it, that there is that one focus. There could be 100 distractions you come across, but you're always going back to that one. You're always going back to that one thing, that one person. There's 100, thousands of them that you could have come across your plate, and they will take your focus, right? It's sometimes it's just hard, right? Like, things are just going to get in your way. Like, it's going to be that wall. It's like, oh my God, you're distracting me. And then you have to figure out how to get it out, like moving around it, get through it. Whatever it is, you have to redirect back to the thing. Put your blinders on. Maybe a blinder fell off. You're like, oh crap, I gotta put it back on. Focus. And that's where it's changed to me, where understanding that it's okay to have distractions. It's okay to have options. And I've beat myself up for it. It's like, man, I shouldn't have these distractions. I shouldn't have these options. You can't control that. They're going to be there, and they should be there. What you can control is your redirection of your focus. Is your redirection of understanding that's what you committed to. Is your frame of understanding that, yes, they're going to be there. You're going to always have doubts. You're always going to have what ifs. You're going to create some ideal of a vision or some magical scenario that if you went this way, it would have done this. You don't know that. You know, and you don't even know the shit that comes with it yet. So stop trying to create that imaginary magical thing and just focus on the work that you need to be doing, and focus on the shit you need to be fixing, and the shit that you actually have in front of you, that you made the commitments to. Because when you made that commitment, you made the commitment that you're not only dealing with the pros, you're dealing with the problems and the cons, right? That's what, even thinking about as like a life partner, when you're reading the vows, it's like, I'm sacrificing myself to you, you're sacrificing yourself to me, but I'm also understanding that we're going to this commitment. I know everything that's bad about you, and I assume all the risk in that. I assume that I'm going to have to deal with all those problems too. Not all the butterflies, the fairy dust and everything. I get all the highs from you too. I get all the good from you, but I'm also assuming all the bad from you. And I'm committing myself to assume all that bad. And when we look at these at a way of assuming all the bad before we say we're just assuming the good, we prepare ourselves with our own expectations. Because when we just expect the good all the time, you're going to be left hurt every time. You're going to be left, honestly, this is where you're left depressed, right? You're feeling in a bad state because you expected just to be good. You can't just expect everything to be good. You got to expect the problems. And when you expect the problems, you prepare yourself for them. You expect the pain. You expect that you will feel like crap. And it's okay to feel like crap. We always, as humans, expect to feel good, and that's where it piles up whenever we feel bad, because now we feel like we shouldn't feel bad. And then because we feel bad that we feel bad. And then it just keeps on building and building, because we have the expectation that we shouldn't feel a certain way, when the expectation should be built on feeling it all, having it all. The good and the bad. And that's when, and that all, I think, surrounds whatever decisions and commitments you make, and understanding that in 50 years it's going to be much harder, and it's only going to get harder. Every year. Whoever you're with and whatever business you're in, it's only going to get harder to say no to everything else. They're going to be there. It's your job to say no to them. And if you said maybe, or if you said, okay, like let me do both, let this in, you'll get to the certain point where you're like, oh my God, that was a bad decision. I got to cut that thing out. I got to redirect my focus. And that's the muscle here that you have to be able to build, to locate. You have to find those distractions. And then you have to act on them, right? You can't just recognize them. You have to act on them. You can't recognize your problems and expect them to change. You have to act on them too. But the first step is recognizing that it's there, recognizing the distraction. But then just act on it. And the more you do it, the better you become, and the more you say no to it, it builds more commitment to what you're doing. That's what commitment is being able to say no to every opportunity that throws your way. They're all going to come. They're going to be coming in like flying, right? And they're going to be bigger and better each time. And the only thing that says that you're committed to something is by saying no to them every time. And even if you end up saying yes to them, it's finally figuring out, oh crap, I made a bad decision. I shouldn't have said yes to this. It's finding it, then cutting it out. And that's okay, because we all make mistakes. We let things in that we shouldn't have before. We let things in, we make bad decisions on things. We're human. We're not perfect. We're not going to always say no to everything. We're going to think that, certain things we need to say yes to. But every time, you let that in, you have to reflect and know that you can't let that in again, right? You can't have it come back and you can't say yes to it again when you already figured out that you had to cut it out and push it away and get it out. Because you had to remain focused on what you're doing, on the person you're with, on the decision you made. Thank you guys. This is a long one, but I think there was a lot of different variables that kind of packed into this one. So hopefully you got a lot of value from it. And I know sticking through this was hard, but put it on 2x next time. Save you some time. I like doing that on videos, and I think it was very well needed to talk about all this at once. See you guys in the next one.